Hello guys, Garcia here. Well guys, today is Halloween, so I decided to compile a list here of different media products that you guys could consume today. So we will talk about 3 TV shows, 5 games, 1 Japanese animation, and 7 movies that I would like to recommend to you guys for this day. And I am only going to use still images for this, heads up, because you guys know how YouTube can be in terms of copyright flagging and infringement and so on. So I would rather not use any sort of moving pictures for this. So I apologize about that. So let's begin. So let's start with the TV shows. So first of all, I would like to talk about what we do in the shadows. So if you guys are members of my channel here and you guys have been watching all my content and stuff, you guys know that I absolutely love Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and I love most of the things vampire that you can possibly see or play or read and so on. So back in the day, I think it was like 2013 or 14, there was a movie called What We Do in the Shadows, right? And in this movie, basically it was a mockumentary about a bunch of vampires living together in a house, basically like in in some sort of like dormitory, like a group of guys from like the university living together, but they happen to be like very old vampires. So it's basically a comedy sketch, but extended to the entirety of a movie, basically. That movie was amazing. It was very groundbreaking breaking back then. It was basically they were basically doing stuff in that movie that later you would see in YouTube and on TikTok and so on. And now, a few years later, they created this show, What We Do in the Shadows, which is basically the same concept: a bunch of old vampires living in the house, but this time is on Staten Island. The first one was in a place in New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken. So they live in Staten Island, which for non-native speakers like me, I had to research. So Staten Island is one of the 5 districts, main districts or main boroughs of New York City. It's the most memed one, seems to be like the poorest one apparently. So they live there in a very like dilapidated old mansion, and it's the 4 vampires, and there's also the familiar of one of the vampires there. So there's Nandor the Relentless, Laszlo, Nadja, Colin Robinson, which is an energy vampire. I'm not going to try to explain this, and Guillermo, which is the familiar. And the show has 6 seasons. It's very funny. The concept of the show is basically these old vampires live in this old house, and a crew comes in and proposes to them that they should make a documentary about them and about their lives in Staten Island, like being all these super old creatures, but in the modern age, trying to deal with modernity and with the society as it is, while trying to hide the fact that they are vampires and so on, which is something that they don't do very well or don't seem to care a whole lot about, to be honest. Is a very, very funny show. Obviously, it's not a super serious show at all, so I don't think that most like Vampire the Masquerade fans will like it like immediately, just because it's not like the serious and full of intrigue like world of darkness that they are used to. But it's very well written. The jokes land constantly, and the main strength of the show basically are the characters. The vampires are amazing. All of the actors like deserve Emmys, and it's a shame that this season right now that started I think like a week ago, if I'm not mistaken, has like already like 3 episodes out, and none of these guys will actually like win Emmys and stuff. The series is this is the last season. It was canceled unfortunately, so yeah, it's very, very annoying. But the show is amazing. 6 seasons, a bunch of contents. You can spend a lot of time with this character. So if you love that movie, you are going to absolutely love this show. So give it a shot. It's just ending right now, so it will be available for posterity on the internet and so on. Has tons of fun ideas and like different characters coming back from different medias and so on. Blade makes an appearance here and so on. So yeah, I highly recommend this one if you like vampires and if you like horror comedies. Next up, I would like to recommend Tales from the Crypt. So you guys know this one. So this one is based on some comics from the 50s, and there was also some cartoons later on. I don't remember, because I've never watched them. It's not like something that actually crossed over here to Brazil, as far as I know. So first of all, Tales from the Crypt. The Crypt Keeper is awesome. He's one of the greatest horror characters of all time. And not because he's scary, but because he's super funny and sarcastic and ironic and so on. So he's absolutely brilliant, one of the greatest characters ever. in the genre. Also, great variety. There's a lot of variety in all of the chapters of Tales from the Crypt. So you can go from like a horror comedy to a super serious one, to one that talks about like pain and regret, to another one that they go to space, and another one that they go back in time, and so on and so on. There's a lot of stuff. There's like super funny episodes. There's like episodes that are really like more on the scary side, but nothing like super scary. But usually there's always some sort of lesson. So at the beginning, the Crypt Keeper gives you the introduction to the episode and the problematic of the episode. And in the end, he is going to basically give you the lesson that you learned. So today, kids, we learned, and then he goes on his diatribe and so on. But it's usually very funny. And also there's some thought-provoking episodes here or there dealing with like very either serious issues or like issues that would like give you like very like relevant moral dilemmas to basically solve in your head. So there's a lot of variety. It's very interesting. It's kind of old, so the production value is not like up there with what is produced today. Obviously, I think it was produced like by the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not exactly sure the time frame. There's a lot of episodes. There's like 7 seasons, I think. I think it's more than 90 episodes because I remember I watched it through its entirety like 5 years ago or something like that. And it was amazing. So I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend this one too. And the last show I would like to recommend is Chucky. So unfortunately, this show recently was canceled. I think it was last month, if I'm not mistaken, which was a shame because this show is really, really good. I think it was only 3 seasons, so not a whole lot of episodes and so on. But this show had a very interesting characteristic, which was it respects the canon fully, basically. So everything that happens in the movies before this show was respected on the show. So all of the characters that you would expect from the franchise came back. So Andy is back with the same actor, amazingly enough. Brad Dourif as the voice of Chucky is back, and so on and so on. Jennifer Tilly and all those people were all brought back for the show to replay the same characters. So there's a sense of continuity, and also the show is really funny and also brutal in parts, as you would expect, because basically Chucky and Child's Play as a whole is a comedy horror or horror comedy franchise. So you would expect some funny, sarcastic moments and also some brutal kills and stuff of that nature. And it delivers in both fronts and also respects the canon and brings back all the characters. So there were 3 great seasons, and it's great for fans of Child's Play, of Chucky, of Brad Dourif's work as Chucky, and so on. So I highly recommend this one, even though unfortunately the show has been canceled, but the seasons that are available are really, really good. Alright guys, now let's go to the games recommendations. So let's talk about Zombies Ate My Neighbors for the Super Nintendo first. So this game is very fun. It's basically like playing a zombie movie from the 80s, but in a video game form. Very fun mechanics. It's very colorful too, has like these beautiful sprites, and the graphics for the Super Nintendo were amazing for that era. It's like this one, Ghoul Patrol, I think is the name of the other one, and Zelda are the like 3 best looking games on the console by far. Lots of stages to play in. So there's like the mall and like the shopping mall, obviously. There's like a pyramid. There's like a garden and so on. There's like a whole lot of different places that you can explore. And the greatest characteristic of this game is that it can be like an entry door to horror, because it is basically a comedy / action game that happens to have this horror undertones to it, and also has a great multiplayer. So it's a very fun game to play with 2 players. So that's my first recommendation. My next recommendation are the first 3 Resident Evil games. So if you guys don't know, recently all 3 of those games were ported to PC and were added to the GOG store, the Good Old Game Store, with a bunch of improvements. So now you can play them on PC without any emulation and with a bunch of graphical improvements and so on. So they are all great games. They are all very like claustrophobic. They are very difficult to deal with, especially by modern standards. My God, the gameplay was very rough back in the day. So the gameplay actually added to the tension of the game because you had to fight the controls sometimes too. And also, these games are very famous for having limited resources. So let's say there's like 100 bullets of a certain weapon, and these bullets are spread all over the game. After you spend all those bullets, it's over. You don't have more bullets. So that's it. So you need to basically manage every single resource that you have. And you need to put them in a box, and then you need to take them out of the box. You can only carry like 8 items or 10 items and so on. So they are very interesting in that way. So basically, Resident Evil is like a true survival horror. You need to survive, and you need to manage your resources correctly, and you need to avoid what you can avoid and fight what you need to fight, and so on. They are very interesting. They are not as scary as what was produced today. Obviously, many years ago, these games came out, but they are super classic. They have classic characters, a bunch of legendary characters in this franchise, and legendary phrases and legendary cutscenes and so on. So I highly recommend these 3 games, especially in the more modern version. Next up on the list, the Granny games. So if you guys have been following my channel, I started the playlist this month. And I played 2 Granny games in the channel, Granny 1 and Granny Chapter 2. I just didn't play the 3rd one. Those games are very fun games. So I consider them like entry games to the horror genre. So if you want to start playing horror games but you don't know where to start, I would recommend Granny games. First, because you can play them on any PC. You don't need a super machine to play those games. Also, you can play them on smartphones. So if you can play on PC, and then you can stop, and then you can go to bed and you can play before you sleep or something like that, if you're not scared, that is. This game is full of like tense moments and jump scares, because you are running away from Granny, from Grandpa, and from Slendrina, and so on, and different characters. So you have to hide. You have to get the items, take these items to a part of the house to do a specific task, get another item to help you to open one of these escapes, and so on. So you are always running away from these characters, and you are always running the risk of like basically turning a corner and getting caught by one of them, you know. So these games have a great atmosphere too. They are awesome puzzle games. They are like very addicting. They are very good games. Like not only they have this scary factor, but they are really good games. They are fun to actually play. There's a lot of games that are horror games that are a slog to play, that they have like cool creatures, but the playability is just horrible. And also, these games happen to have a lot of replayability value. So you can replay it in like different difficulties. You can replay it again, and the objects will be in different parts of the house. So the item that was here in the next one is going to be there, and so on. So these games are awesome, and I highly recommend all 3. The next one on the list is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Obviously, this game is not on the list here because it's a horror game, because it isn't. But it's a great classic Metroidvania filled with horror undertones, you know. Has great level design, has a fantastic soundtrack, probably the best soundtrack of the PS1, or maybe the second best behind Chrono Cross, you know what I mean? And has lots and lots of classic and mythological monsters. So you have, obviously, Alucard, which is the main character, he's a vampire. And you have Dracula, which is the vampire. And then you have zombies, you have ghosts, you have werewolves, you have hydras, you have shapeshifters, you have mummies, and you have even like Frankenstein's monster is like one of the bosses in the second castle, and so on. And so this game has a lot of horror stuff going for it. So it's basically like a Super Metroid, but instead of like a spaceship or like different planets and so on in the future, it's in the past, and it's filled with these legendary creatures from folklore and from horror movies and so on. So it's a game that you can truly appreciate as a horror fan, even though the game obviously is not a horror game at all. It has so much horror in it in terms of motif, you know, that it really satisfies your brain if you're a horror game fan. And also has great playability, one of the best in the PS1 easily, and also one of the best atmospheres. So you have the library, you have the outer wall, you have Oroc's quarters, you have the entrance of the castle, you have the mines, you have a bunch of different stages and so on. So a lot of cool stuff to look at. So yeah, I highly recommend this one too. And the last game I would like to recommend to you guys today is Outlast. So differently from the other ones, this one I only recommend for the really hardcore, for really like people that really enjoy being scared and really enjoy horror and horror movies and horror stories and so on, someone that's used to it. Because if you're not, this game is not for you at all. It's not going to be an enjoyable experience. It's going to be a chore. So I consider Outlast the single greatest horror game of all time. It's like the pinnacle of the genre for me. Like Civilization is the best strategy game, and Minecraft is the best sandbox, and so on. Outlast is the greatest horror game of all time so far. It's a true bravery test, in my opinion. So basically, you are fighting more yourself than the game. You are fighting more the darkness in the Mount Massive Asylum there, instead of necessarily like a group of mechanics and so on. A very interesting thing about Outlast is that it's a super easy game, has super simple mechanics. The entire game can only be like described in 3 mechanics. That's it. You have to gather batteries to keep your camera up so you can see stuff, especially in the dark. You need to get the files so you can get tidbits of the story here and there, and you can get like gather all of these files and make the story in your mind for you to be able to understand what's happening. Basically the file system of the Resident Evil games, that you get a bunch of files here and there, and those files tell you the story of the place. And the third mechanic is running and hiding, which is basically all you can do. You don't fight anybody. You don't like get like a piece of wood and start bonking enemies in the head. You just basically keep running the entire time and hiding. So yeah, that's Outlast. And also the most oppressive atmosphere I've ever felt in a game ever. So recently I told you guys during one of my playthroughs that I was replaying it. And man, this game holds up extremely well. It's like it was made yesterday. It just didn't age at all. It's amazing to this day. And also, this is going to sound super weird, it has a great DLC called The Whistleblower that tells the story of the person that came to the asylum to work before the main character of the main game went there. And the DLC is actually scarier than the main game. So it's a very interesting fact there. So yeah, I highly recommend Outlast, the greatest horror game of all time. But only if you really enjoy horror games and if you really want to try something that really will scare you. Because the first jump scare in the game, if you can't handle that one, you can't handle the game. That's basically it. So it's a great test. That's why they put the jump scare there in the first like 10-15 minutes of the gameplay. So you would know right away, all right, this is not for me, and then you would turn it off, you know. So I really recommend Outlast, and good luck. Alright guys, next up in my list of recommendations here, I would like to recommend to you guys a Japanese animation. This one is called Shiki from 2010. So instead of like trying to explain what this is, I'm actually going to read to you guys the first paragraph of the wiki page about Shiki, and we'll go from there. So, Shiki, which can be translated to corpse demon or death spirit, is a Japanese horror novel written by Fuyumi Ono. It was originally published in 2 parts by Shinshosha in 1998, and it was then reprinted into 5 parts in 2002. The story is about a small Japanese village named Sotoba, which is plagued by bizarre deaths caused by what seemed to be an epidemic. However, when Toshio Ozaki, the hospital dean, performs his own investigations, he discovers vampires known as Shiki, the corpse demons, living in their midst. So basically that's the plot summary of Shiki. So if you noticed by listening to that, this plot is pretty similar to the plot of Salem's Lot, the Stephen King novel. And I'm pretty sure that the author of Shiki also referenced the fact that he was a big fan of Salem's Lot 2 in his work. So it's not like it was out of nowhere, that was by design, you know what I mean? So this is an animation geared towards young adults, so it's not for kids at all. God help me if I watched that when I was like 10 years old. And it's a very sad and poignant story, because you listen to, oh, so a part of the village like are vampires and they are turning other people and people are starting to disappear and so on. Then you imagine, oh, this is a classic like vampire against humans tale, and then the guy is going to become a vampire hunter and try to clean the city out of the vampiric presence and so on. That's not how it goes, really. So lots of bad and horrific stuff happens, and at a certain point in the story, at least for me, you lose the sense of who are the bad guys and who are the good guys, and they kind of become like just a bunch of victims in the same living in the same environment, and they have to deal with each other, and you can't like point out who's actually right and wrong anymore, because like there are two different species of creatures trying to survive in the same environment, you know. So and it's not like the humans can't fight back either. So you constantly see the two sides of the conflict. So you don't see only the human side, you know. So it's not like us versus them. Let's just kill these creatures and so on. There's a lot of scenes on this show here that are seared onto my brain here that I never forgot because they are so brutal in concept. Because it's animation, it loses a little bit of scene, obviously. But when you extrapolate that and try to put that in the real world, in real life, there's some stuff that happens in this on the show that is just absolutely brutal for anybody, you know. And 14 years later, because I watched this show when it came out in 2010, I remember reading the synopsis for this show back then. Back then, I was watching like 30 anime per season there. So I was watching more than 100 anime per year. So I watched everything from romance to horror to fighting anime to like racing to everything. Everything. And this one was the best in 2010, in my opinion. And yeah, it has one of the best soundtracks of all time in Japanese animation. The soundtrack of this thing is amazing. I have it on my PC. I was not able to let it go. The music just entered my brain, never left, you know. Has one of the worst scenes that I've ever seen in anything in terms of horror. A scene that scares me to this day. Has like 22 episodes and has like 2 OVAs, which are original video animations, which are usually extra chapters that come with the DVD bundle. Nowadays it's kind of a different stuff because nowadays everything is online, so I don't know how they are called nowadays, but basically extra episodes. So there are 24 episodes really, and you see both sides all the time. So yeah, it's a very melancholic show. A lot of bad stuff happened to a lot of people, and it descends into this chaos, and it never comes out of it really. But it's a top-notch horror animation. I really recommend it. So if you guys have like a problem with like watching animation, oh, this is for kids and so on, it isn't. It really isn't. So look for it. I don't know if Chic is available in like Crunchyroll or maybe even like a Shudder or something, because it deserves to be there. It's really, really good, and it's based on the book that we talked about a few minutes ago. And that's the animation that I have to recommend to you guys for your Halloween. And finally, guys, let's talk about my movie recommendations. So let's start with 13 Ghosts from 2001. So this is my favorite horror movie of all time, and is also my second favorite movie of all time, only behind the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And this movie is actually a remake from a movie from the 50s and 60s by William Castle, the director. Was a very avant-garde director. He had a bunch of like cool ideas and decided to put them into practice. So he had a lot of wacky horror films during that period. And then someone created a company called Dark Castle Entertainment, a production company, and they decided to create a few remakes from his work. So this is the second one. We are going to talk about the first one in the next entry in the list here. So this movie is a great improvement over the other one. It's an amazing looking movie in terms of like horror movies, because one of the marks of the early years of Dark Castle Entertainment, their productions, was basically the fact that they constructed these big, beautiful sets for every single one of their movies. We are going to talk about the next one, and the next one also has the same characteristic of like very cool set designs and so on. So in this one, basically there's a guy called Arthur Criticos, and he has his wife and kids. And there's a fire in his house, and his wife dies. So for the next few months, they are struggling and living in a small place and so on. Him and his kids, and the babysitter and so on. And his uncle dies, and his uncle is like a ghost hunter, by lack of a better term for him. And he inherits a house from his uncle. And he knows that his uncle was always weird, a guy that like chased after this like spiritual essences and so on. So he receives a house from his uncle, and he goes there with his family, and they get stuck in the house, and all hell breaks loose. Basically, that's it. The initial 5-6 minutes of this movie are the best horror thing ever created, in my opinion. Of all books, movies, and TV shows and everything, the first 6 minutes of this movie are amazing. If you don't watch anything else, don't just watch the beginning of the movie. It's amazing. I'm not going to even explain what happens. This movie has great lore and great depth to the lore. Has a great soundtrack too. Has obviously a very very cool concept. It's very difficult to explain without giving like a ton of spoilers, and I don't want to. I want you guys to have the experience to actually watch the movie for yourselves. If you guys have never seen this before, about like Basilius and the machine and the 12 ghosts and the 13th ghost and so on and so on. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to give you guys this outline here and recommend it to you guys. This movie is amazing. Has 12 super cool looking ghosts, all of them in practical effects. So no CG. Every single ghost is an actor that it is on the set. Well, there's CG in a couple of them, but the actors are there on set. It's not like a bunch of ghosts. Ooh, the door closed by itself. My God, that's so scary. You know, they are actually there, and the house, the glass house, is very very cool. So yeah, I recommend this one. My favorite horror movie of all time. The next one on the list is also a remake from one of William Castle's movies. It's called House on Haunted Hill, 1999. And this one is very interesting because it's very different from the original one. But the original one is also a great movie. So if you guys don't mind black and white stuff, super old movies, watch that one too because that one is really good. So this is another haunted house movie, just like the last one, but it's a completely different story. And this one is also another one of my all-time favorites. I watch 13 Ghosts and House on Haunted Hill every year, at least once. They are super scary. And this movie specifically was my childhood trauma, basically. So everybody that's a horror fan ends up getting traumatized by something. Sometimes it's The Exorcist, sometimes it's like Poltergeist or The Omen or something else, you know. But in my case, it was House on Haunted Hill. I was not ready to watch this movie, and when I did, I didn't forget a single thing, and basically I was never the same again after that. So I would only like start watching horror movies way later when I was like 14, 15. So yeah, it was not the best idea. That's why the indications exist, you know, the ages. So this movie here, first of all, has the scariest opening credits of all time. No joke. Pause this video right now, go on YouTube and go and type in House on Haunted Hill opening credits. The scariest music, the scariest imagery, the scariest combination of music and imagery. You know that you're in for something absolutely brutal, you know? It's absolutely legendary. The opening sequence, just like 13 Ghosts, is amazing. The entire opening sequence is like a great rebellion in this asylum, in this insane asylum, you know. So a lot of people killing each other and torturing each other and so on. The asylum itself has an amazing design, has a very cool lore attached to it too. Just like the other movies from Dark Castle, they really try to create these amazing sets and create this amazing lore for the characters and for the ghosts and for the enemies and so on, to be able to build this like mini world for the movie, you know. So they went above and beyond most horror movies. And the story of the movie is quite simple. There's this asylum, or there was this asylum, that was led by a guy called Dr. Vennecut. Cut, you know. And there was this rebellion back in, I don't know, the 30s, the 40s, 20s, one of those years there, 50s maybe. And the asylum has a mechanism to lock the place down in case there's a revolt, so the crazies would not like leave the vicinity and go to like a city or something. So they would lock down the entire place, all the windows and all the doors and so on. So the rebellion started, they activated the mechanism, and everybody got stuck inside. So everybody died. Everybody that was on the medical side and everybody that was on the crazy side, everybody died on the place. And later on, they found out that this doctor and his team of doctors were actually torturing and creating like grotesque statues and different things with the bodies of the inmates there. So they would torture these people without any anesthesia and so on. There's an insane torture scene in the beginning for like a child. I watched that and I was like, my God, what the hell is that? And to this day, it gives me the creeps. You know, obviously today is way tamer, but back in the day was horrible. So that happens, and then like many years later, Vincent Price, or Vincent Price is the name of the actor in the first one, but in this one, I think the name of the character is something Price. I forgot his name. I don't know if it's Vincent Price or Vince Price or something Price. And he his wife is going to commemorate a birthday, and he hates his wife. He hates her guts, and she hates him too. So it's a very good marriage, to to put it very mildly. And he decides to make a party in the insane asylum that is now kind of a museum that has been reconstructed and so on many years later. And he decides to go there, but some sort of entity goes into his computer and creates like this random list of guests for her birthday, and they all go there, and she doesn't know any of them, and he frankly also doesn't know any of them except the caretaker of the place. And he creates like this game environment to make the place more scary, and he promises everybody that survives that one night in the asylum will get, I think, $1 million by the morning. So that's the setup of the movie. I'm not going to tell anything else. I'm already extending myself too much here. But yeah, this movie is awesome. I love this movie so much. It's still scary to this day. Even for people that are used to horror movies, if you watch this one for the first time, even though it's like old and stuff, certain imagery and certain jump scares and things that happen in the movie will creep you out, I guarantee you. So that's my second recommendation. Next up is The Endless from 2017. So this one is actually a spiritual sequel to Resolution, which is a movie from 2012 that I also recommend. So if you are going to watch this one, I recommend watching Resolution first, but you don't need to, but it will enhance your experience because there's some similarities and some characters overlap, you know what I mean? So basically, this one is about two brothers. I think they work in cleaning, if I'm not mistaken. So they clean houses and stuff. And then they receive a tape from a cult that they were part of when they were younger. And for a few reasons they discuss between them there, they decide to go and visit the cult that live like in the middle of the woods in like a secluded area. And basically, I'm sorry about that, but that's the all I can say without spoiling anything. There's a lot of spoilers if I explain too much about this movie. But this movie has like terrifying Lovecraftian themes. No joke. I think, in my opinion, this is the best Lovecraftian movie of all time in terms of like using some of the themes that Lovecraft used to work on his work, you know? So that without necessarily having like tentacular creatures and Cthulhu and world-ending events and things of that nature, you know? Especially related to time and space and the powerlessness in relation to like certain, let's say, unknown forces, you know what I mean? So it's a very engaging movie. It's a very smart movie too. It's very like thought provoking. You find yourself like thinking, is this right? Is this wrong? You know, should these people have these other people or not? Should this person be involved or not? If I were in this situation, would I do that or not? You know, can be sad and difficult to watch at times, to be honest. But it's also beautiful in some aspects, which is the only time I'm going to actually use this word in this entire list. But this movie is actually beautiful in a poetic kind of way, in a loss and sadness kind of way, and also very poignant at times. You know, you keep thinking like, what if that happened? What if they weren't there? What if they didn't went there? What if this person didn't said that? What if this first thing didn't trigger the second thing, and so on? So I'm being very vague because I don't want to give any spoilers at all. This movie is amazing. In terms of like being a movie, an actual movie, this is the best one on the list easily. So even if you don't like horror per se, you can watch this movie easily without being specifically a fan of horror, and you will still enjoy it a lot. And has a great ending, an awesome ending. I enjoyed the ending of this movie very, very much. That's all I'm gonna say. And to me, is the greatest Lovecraftian horror tale ever created. That is not from Lovecraft himself. So I know that's high praise, but watch it and tell me what you guys think. And also, if you guys follow my logic here and watch Resolution first, you will be ready for what happened in Endless. And a couple of characters, or more maybe, from the Resolution film will show up again in Endless. So when I say spiritual sequel, I mean that in a way that they are not direct sequels to each other, but they have way more connections than two like disconnected films in the same place would have. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend this one. Next up is The Fog from 1980, a John Carpenter movie. This one is very interesting because this movie is not actually scary per se, but in my opinion, this movie is like a masterclass in suspense building, basically. So trying to like not spoil too much, it involves a curse, it involves a coastal city, it involves like pirates or mariners, if you could call them that. And basically, you have all these characters in this small city that are involved in this. And there's a curse that's going to bring like a supernatural fog to the city. And basically, the first part of the movie is these characters basically interacting with each other and their stories and so on. And the second part of the movie is the fog actually coming in. So the fogs come way later in the movie. I think it's more than maybe 1 hour in, or more than 1 hour in, the fogs actually enters the city, you know. So it's a very good movie because you get engaged early on, and until the fog arrives, you have no idea what's going to happen. So you like, so the fog is here. Okay, so what's going to happen? What's inside the fog? What's the point of the fog? Is the fog like toxic or something like that? So it's very well acted, very well directed. Obviously, John Carpenter is one of the all-time horror greats. So yeah, it's a great movie. A great soundtrack too. One of the soundtracks I have in my PC here. I love so much that song. You guys will know when the song plays in the movie. It's not super scary and not like one of John Carpenter's best, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine. So that's why I'm recommending The Fog. The next one on the list is a great sci-fi horror classic, Event Horizon from 1997. So this one is also one of my childhood traumas. There's a set of scenes in this movie that I watched when I was a kid and I shouldn't have. And man, they haunt me to this day sometimes. So this movie is set in 2047, and the plot basically, roughly speaking, is mankind built a starship called the Event Horizon to go to Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star to us here in the universe, using a gravity drive system, which basically means that they were opening a wormhole from the ship to a distant place so they could cover these big distances in time and space, right? But this ship goes missing for a few years, and then this ship reappears near Neptune, I think. And another ship is sent there to investigate the return of this old ship, with the designer of the ship in the crew. So Sam Neill's character is in the crew of this new ship that's going to go to Neptune to check out this older ship that vanished for a few years, then came back for some reason, and sent a very terrifying distress signal to the new ship. And the distress signal is full of like screaming and people crying and like some Latin and so on being spoken there. So yeah, this is the scariest space horror I've ever seen. Yeah, Alien's not the first one. The design of the ship is very disturbing because it has some religious motifs to it. So it has some crosses. It is in the shape of a cross and so on. So it has this like religious I would say undertone, but in this case more of like an overtone. More, it's very obvious, and the level of violence and gore in this movie is very similar to the Hellraiser movies. I think that's why I like it so much, because Hellraiser is probably my favorite horror franchise of all time, and this movie feels like Hellraiser in space, you know. So basically, they go there to check out this ship in Neptune, and they eventually get trapped in the old ship, and basically becomes a haunted starship movie, for a lack of a better term, you know. This movie has some of the scariest sound design I've ever heard in my life for anything. So this is one of those that if you're not up to it, don't watch it. You know, it's not going to be a pleasant ride. So it feels like a more pure version of Doom, the game. You know, oh, they open like a portal to connect, like, I don't know, like Earth and the Moon and Mars, for example, and something or someone takes over this portal and demons start spawning from it. So it's kind of like that version of like the wormhole brings enemies and so on. It's a very interesting movie. Obviously, this movie has been around forever, and people, most horror fans know about it, obviously. And the cast of this movie is amazing. Sam Neill kicks all kinds of ass always in horror movies. But you have like Lawrence Fishburne and a bunch of other people that you would see right away. Would be like, oh, I know this guy. Oh, I know this lady, and so on. You know. So it's a true ensemble cast for this movie here. So this movie is terrifying. I'm not going to explain more than this. If you never watched it, give it a shot. But again, this one is for the more hardcore fans. But yeah, this is my recommendation for you guys. Event Horizon. The next one here is another one that I just talked about on the channel, Grave Encounters from 2011. And also I'm going to recommend the sequel, Grave Encounters 2, from a year later, basically. So yeah, I talked about this one before on the channel because I play Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines a lot on the channel. And in that game, there's a show called Haunted LA, and one of the characters in the game works at that show, and they go to like this supposedly haunted locations, like, oh, this abandoned hospital, oh, this abandoned like factory, oh, here people died because of this or that, and this stuff that like Ghost Adventures do on our actual world, right? So what if the crew of these types of shows, one of those crews went to a place to film one of those like fake horror, you know, experience for TV, for a TV episode or something like that, and they actually found what they were looking for. So that's basically Grave Encounters. So Grave Encounters is a found footage film, and it's basically filmed by the crew of the paranormal investigation TV show that they are a part of there, and they lock themselves in an abandoned psychiatric hospital, to look for supernatural entities for the show, and they end up actually finding the entities. That's the it's a very cool concept. Today is like very, you know, oh, that has been done 1,000 times, but back in 2011, I know it sounds like it's not too long ago, but in terms of internet lore and how the things are moving, how fast they are moving, 2011 might as well be like the time of the dinosaurs, the the age when they walked on the earth. You know what I mean? In terms of like how long ago this was. So it's a brilliant movie. So there's several great horror concepts involving like time, involving like space, the use of darkness, or basically in this case like the lack of light and so on, and like the, how should I say, the cameras that have like infrared and things of that nature, you know. So it's basically the definition of like, if you look around for something bad long enough, you will find it. You know what I mean? And they do find it. It's a very fun movie, not for the guys that are inside there, obviously, but for you watching. It's not like super scary. It has some like not so great CG and stuff, but the concept is amazing, and the way the movie is basically designed as like this documentation, as basically a way to explain what happened to these people that were there to record this fake TV, scary TV show, and ended up being stuck in that place and so on. So it's very, very cool. So I highly, highly recommend this one, especially if you're a fan of these ghost hunting TV shows or YouTube channels. This is what would happen if it actually it was real. You know what I mean? And my last movie recommendation is Sinister from 2012. This is the scariest movie I have ever seen. Period. I did not watch this one as a kid. I watched this one as an adult. I'm 33 years old, and this movie haunts me to this day. It's the best horror movie I've ever seen in terms of scariness. It is the scariest by far. It's not even close. So, and also the picture on my channel is from this movie, from the cover of this movie. That's not by accident, by the way. So, in this movie, Ethan Hawke, I don't remember the name of his character in the movie. So he's a true crime writer, and he moves to a house in which some unexplained murders took place with his entire family, but his family don't know about it. You know, they find out later in the movie, and that does not go well. And he wants to find out what happened to the family that died in that place to basically write a book about it because he's a true crime writer and stuff. So he wants to write a book about them. He eventually finds a box in the attic or in the basement, I think it's in the attic, with a bunch of Super 8 film reels, one of those round ones. And he finds a projector there and he starts watching those movies that he finds in the box there. And these are basically murder tapes, for lack of a better term. So they document the murders of entire families from different time periods. So he starts watching them and investigating the clues in those videos. This movie is extremely violent, but it's a violent in a completely different way that you would expect. It's not that the violence itself it's extreme. It's that the idea of what's happening or why it's happening is so extreme in your brain that the violence is actually more scary than actual gory violence. You know what I mean? It's very difficult to explain. It's very unsettling. It's very uncomfortable. It's a very brutal concept. I'm not going to explain the concept here, obviously. If you never watched it, this is my pitch for you to watch it. But be very careful with this movie, especially if you are weak in relations like to things being done or like happening to children, I would say. So the acting and directing in this movie are amazing. I think this is one of the first, if I'm not mistaken, A24 movies. Or maybe this is like a Blumhouse movie. I think it's like an A24 movie, one of the early ones that were very successful. Super small budget, but ended up making like several times this budget on cinemas and stuff. So yeah, what else can I say about this movie? Yeah, the entity. There's an entity involved in the crimes and stuff. I'm not going to talk about more than this, but the entity is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. It's the type of stuff that you're like paying like a lot of attention, and somehow you're missing something, and then you look in the screen, you're like, oh my god, what the hell? And your heart almost stops. And it's not like necessarily a jump scare per se. The thing has always been there, but you didn't notice before. Like Lake Mungo, if you guys know that movie, that one that's like a documentary of a girl that died. And basically it's a documentary about her family, kind of like telling the story and trying to let go of the whole process, you know? And you find out later that she was in the house, her ghost and so on. It's very similar here, but it's even more scary because it's not a girl, it's like a being, you know? And yeah, the investigation of the movie is also very engaging. The more Ethan Hawke's characters like dives into the situation, the worse the situation gets and the scarier it gets too. So yeah, I'm trying to not give that many spoilers, but I'm going to show you a single image, only one image. So this image right here is the opening shot of the movie. The movie opens with this, at least the version that I watched. So imagine this is the opening shot of a movie and you still have to watch like 1 hour and 40 minutes of this stuff. Yeah. So yeah, Sinister, in my opinion, is the scariest movie ever made in terms of like fake stuff. Obviously, if you are going to watch a documentary on this and that, it's going to be scarier because it's real. But in terms of fantasy, this is the scariest one I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, guys, so these are my Halloween recommendations. So I'd like to thank everybody that watched this video. And I'm sorry for the long video too, but I wanted to explain exactly why I was recommending what I recommended in the video there. And also, I would like to thank everybody that watched the Halloween playlist, just a new thing that I tried on the channel. And it worked actually pretty well. And I'm very glad and I'm very thankful too. So maybe next year we'll bring this back once again. And maybe I'll do more recommendation videos later. So happy Halloween, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.